This is the tutorial video for the typography assignment in the Art 159 graphic design layout course. So we're going to go over a couple things here to get you started on getting through this assignment. Looking at the module here for the typography assignment, and in the assignment sheet area there are some details on setting up the file to work with this layout. So we have a document information here within Adobe InDesign, creating the size with the correct margins and pages. So we're only working with grayscale here, and we are creating 4 different layouts that have some rules within them as well. So as you are working on this project, make sure to refer back to the assignment sheet that you are working under the constraints for each individual layout. The idea is you kind of have this limited amount of changes that you can make in the beginning using only one typeface and one size of that typeface, but you can use any style and any sort of basic text editing formatting options like that were discussed in the lecture. And then we start slowly opening it up to more options. So now you can use still one typeface in layout number 2, and then any typeface fonts, and then we're basically introducing the addition of scale or using different sizes to create emphasis. Layout 3 introduces 2 typefaces, pushing some contrast between the 2 choices that you're making, and then any typeface fonts within those typefaces and any size that you'd like to use. And then essentially layout number 4 just really opens the floodgates to any typefaces, any typeface fonts within those, and any size. So we're kind of taking baby steps along the way here within these 4 different layouts using Adobe InDesign and hopefully getting more familiar with editing different text formatting. So let's hop on over to InDesign. I'm going to open up the program here, and I actually have an example that we'll take a look at. But before we do that, let's take a look at creating this document. So if you go into File and New, or if you open up InDesign, you might be prompted to open up or create a new document. We are going to go ahead and name this file. I'm going to create the naming convention here, underscore typography. And then we're going to set up the size. So again, going back to the assignment sheet, it states in the very beginning, we're creating an 8-inch by 8-inch document with 0.25-inch margins and 4 pages to be included. So we want to specify the units being used not as picas if you have something different here, but as inches. And then we want to specify 8 inches in width and 8 inches in height. We also want to have 4 pages in this document. The default is typically going to be 1. And the default is typically going to have facing pages as well, which means that they would be side to side. We do not want that for this assignment. We want these to be individual layouts for each page. So we're going to toggle that off so that we just have a single page on each layout here. And moving on down, we're going to keep the columns as 1, but coming down to the margins, again in the assignment sheet, it specifies 0.25. So we're going to go ahead and hit the down button here just for the top, and that will do that universally to all sides. If you needed to change one individual side, you could unlock these and do them individually, but with that locked it will automatically do all of those sides. And that should get us there. So we're going to come down. You can always preview ahead of time if you'd like to. We're going to go ahead and create this document. And looking at this here, you can now see, come up to my window and go into my Essentials workspace and reset that just so we're all looking at the same thing here. You can see that I have 4 individual pages with the margins set and ready to begin our layouts. So the idea behind the margins is you typically don't want your text to go beyond those margins unless you are planning on having that bleed outside of the composition itself. So I'm going to toggle back over here for a second. This is an example here, and if I zoom in, kind of see how this is working on the preview. So you can see here the first layout, and this is the one that's shown in the module as well. The first layout here is just using one typeface. And then we start introducing the ability to use one typeface in any style, and then size within there as well. Then 2 typefaces at any size, and then as many typefaces as you want, as many sizes as you want as well. So this is an example of that bleeding off of the composition. Besides that, all of this text is basically contained within those margins. Slightly different size here than what we have to work with in the other document, but still see that all that text is contained, again, unless it is planned on being bled out. So I'm going to come back to this document here. Let's check this typeface. So in the original typeface here, to get started, first thing you want to do on layout number 1 is create some sort of text box here within the space. And assuming that you have already figured out what quote you're going to use, you're going to go ahead and paste that. Go ahead and copy this from the example and paste it in here. And just for the visibility, let's go ahead and default this back to the basic paragraph setting. So we have now our quote that is pasted here inside of the space. Let me just go ahead and bring this back to the default here as well for all of this. This must be a different setting here, which is strange. Let's go ahead and keep that back to mission. Auto 0. So you're probably going to have something like this when you get inside of your composition here. Of course, you can always change this to different grayscale values within the space as well. And this is where, again, you're going to select a typeface and start to think about the sort of visual representation of your quote itself. Where are there breaks within your quote? Where can you emphasize words? You can see that I already started to do that here just because I copied and pasted already in the previous example. But I'm really looking at this first sentence. Most processes leave out the stuff no one wants to talk about. And then I'm highlighting these words down here: magic, intuition, and leaps of faith. And this is by a designer named Michael Beirut. So the idea here is, how can you emphasize that within a typeface that you are choosing and not being able to change the size or the style? So let's go ahead and choose something here to explore. Go with this adorn typeface here. And I'm going to pick a general size to use here. Let's go ahead and kick this up to 22. And you'll notice that as soon as I use the type tool here and select all of this, the properties tab is going to give me these editing properties for the typeface. So this is where I can select the style, the typeface itself that I would like to use, and preview those. And then I can also look at the different styles that that typeface might have. Let's see if we can find one that might have some different styles. Here we go. This one has 91 options within it. So there are lots of different options within this typeface that we can use, right? So we're only able to use one style here, but as you work through the additional layouts, you can open that up to different options. So really here, we are going to look at some of these basic formatting options. And I'm going to just highlight this area here that has these words I'm trying to emphasize. I don't want to change the size on layout 1 because I'm restricted to only having one size, but I can look at these other options here as well. I can click on those little 3 dots to expand this even further. The first is the leading, which is the spacing between each line of text. And if I click on the drop down, I can increase that leading, which gives me a lot more space and opens that up, creating some emphasis there in regards to the words I'm trying to highlight. Kick this down using the Enter key here. And then highlighting these words again, we have our leading here. In fact, I'll kick that up even further to 72. And then below that, we have our tracking. And this is, again, where you can either bring words in really close together, potentially, or you can, drop down, or you can spread those apart. And you can actually enter in a numeral here as well. Let's go ahead and enter in 700. You can see that we really kick out those letter forms, pushing those throughout the space. Might be a little bit too much. Let's go back to 400 there. So between the letting and the tracking of this these words here, we have created some emphasis here, and we can continue to explore some options. We don't want to necessarily skew these letters. You always want to make sure that your proportions are set to 100% here. And in this additional options, typically if you're going to use some sort of italicized option, try to find a typeface instead of using the percentage there as well. So we'll stick with those for now. But another piece we can use is the caps, all caps option here, which changes the lowercase letter forms to capital letter forms, makes that stand out a little further, or even small cap options, which is not changing the size of the typeface, you'll notice, but it's using the same baseline as our lowercase letter forms, but having those capital letters span that space. And then we also have some additional options here as well within the superscript option and the subscript option, which places it in different placements. We also have underlining and then lining strike through, which puts the line through the text. So I'm going to take off the subscript there, and let's see what we got. Yeah, let's leave those as those small caps. That's kind of cool. Keep back our points there. So just making some basic changes there, it actually creates quite a bit of emphasis in these words compared to the actual text up here. And then obviously you could play with some placement of these. So maybe I wanted to take these and position them in the alignment of the paragraph, not using left alignment, but using center alignment or possibly even right alignment. You could also use justified options here, which doesn't look too good with the small amount of text that we have. So maybe I'll kind of keep that as my center alignment. Get rid of that space up there at the top as well. Here. And then for the contribution to created that, I'll use the right alignment just to switch it up a little bit. So we have left alignment for our first area, center alignment for our second area, and right alignment. So those are the basic text formatting options, and you can see this looks very different from what we started with, creating some emphasis there in the areas of the text that we wanted to. And basically you continue this process. The biggest difference is within the additional layouts. If I go back to the other example here, is that now you can change the size, and that can sometimes be helpful if you break out the text into different text boxes. So you'll notice that this is all the same text here. Sorry, there's a trash truck in the background. This is all the same text, but it's just broken up into different text boxes. So you can see how we're positioning that and even rotating that as well within each one of these text boxes. You can see if I come over to the corner, I can simply get this little turn arrow and position that. I would suggest holding the shift key so that it keeps that perfectly horizontal instead of just picking an arbitrary angle, which can sometimes look a little messy within the space. But you can always do something like on a 45-degree angle or something like that, which can be interesting as well. So just some options there. And then opening up different options within typeface choices that you're doing. So I suggest when you are choosing different typefaces to choose ones that are contrasting each other. So here we have a serif typeface, sort of typewriter style, if you will, and then a sans serif typeface. And then obviously the sizing and the positioning is different. And then even here we have some different options. We have this sans serif that's being used with a more, a decorative sort of sans serif here, and then a standard sans serif. And then we have this more slab serif style that's being used along the bottom. So kind of mixing it up among those options and trying to contrast the type within the space as well. And the last little bit is, again, you can play with any grayscale values, whether it's black or white or anywhere in between. You can also use white text in different areas. If you wanted to create a large box that is even dark in the background and use white text on top of that, or white text over dark text like you can see here, that can be an interesting way to push these concepts too. So please follow along within the practice here of creating these different text boxes, playing with the basic text formatting of the letting, the tracking of the letter forms, and then of course the different fonts that you're choosing within the typefaces. and the scale of those within the element. And really thinking about how you can emphasize different parts of the quote within these layouts and create a different sort of read for the text within each one of these individual layouts as well. So please reach out if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing the final designs.